Welcome to the Green Ocean Weekly Podcast, the show to inspire current and aspiring leaders in real estate. I'm Paige Ward, your host. Today's topic is going to be goal setting for the second half of the year. Now, we do like to start off each week on a positive note too, and I do like to ask my fine co-hosts here what went well. So, Jason, let's start with you. This time, I bet I threw you because I usually start with Howard. So, Jason.
It's true. I thought I had an extra couple of seconds there, Paige. But yeah, what went well for me this week is, I don't know if you've been watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, you know that my partner and I recently opened our John L. Scott office. That was June 1st. And we have one of our listings went pending this week. So we have our first pending sale as our own brokerage. And so we're pretty excited about that. And I don't know, it just feels good to kind of, you always want to get the monkeys off your back and get those first ones knocked out. So thanks.
So Howard, my friend, what went well for you?
You tell me first. What went well for you, Paige?
Oh, okay. Is anybody sensing a theme for this week? This is going to be a fun episode. I'm just actually, I had a pretty phenomenal week, last couple of weeks with two of my kids graduating university. I had my youngest daughter is engaged to be married now with her boyfriend that she's been dating since they were 15 years old. And my son, who was one of the college graduates, also commissioned as an officer in the United States Air Force.
Woo!
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a very eventful week. And so I'm excited about that. Pretty proud mom.
Nice.
That's a huge week, actually. Good job.
It is. And now that my youngest has decided she wants to move to San Diego, my husband and I are both like, what do we want to do now? This is pretty cool. So we have some goals to set ourselves. So Howard, back at you then. What went well for you?
Well, so sometimes our what went wells start off with what went wrong, right? And so now on one hand, I can be like, oh, I've got the Handy app, and I could just call somebody to replace a garbage disposal for me. But then, of course, the very first thing, Jason, you and I talked about, hey, if you ever have a question, YouTube it, right? Or go to, Google it, YouTube it. So I, go onto YouTube real quick. I'm like, man, this looks really easy, the installation of another one, right? Especially if you get the same brand. So I went to the store, and I bought that brand, and with a better motor, of course. And it didn't take me very long, right? But went ahead and installed it. It's working. It's great. Now, of course, what continues to go wrong, even though I think it's all fixed, is that there's the little spout on top of your sink when you run the dishwasher, and the water is not supposed to because it's an overflow, right? And so it's just like, now water is coming out of that thing after a day, right? So I'm like, okay, I obviously did something wrong.
Obviously.
So now the frustration's starting to set in, and now I'm second guessing myself. I'm like, I should have just contacted somebody, because now I've got to undo the whole thing because there's a stopper on that garbage disposal unit. They got to pop out first, right? I'm like, why did they do this? This makes no sense to me. So of course, I do that. And then now, of course, my wife is just like, honey, there's been that leak on the garden hose for like a year.
Howard the handyman.
So now I'm like back to the store, and we've all had those experiences where all of a sudden we're making multiple trips to the local, Ace Hardware or the Home Depot. So I'm back over there, and I buy a 79-cent little washer. And, of course, you turn off the water and just unscrew it, replace the little thing, and the drip stops. And I kind of had like this aha moment, right? I know that, of course, I'm always creating these associations, but I had this aha moment. Man, I let my faucet leak for a year. Just drip, drip, drip. I know it's not good. It's frustrating my wife. She's asked me so many times, right? But it almost kind of took this, of all things, this garbage disposal breaking down for me to make these multiple trips, get the washer, and get that taken care of. And I think what I realized was it wasn't just laziness, right? It wasn't just procrastination, but it was just really like my habit, my behavior of like wanting to do something new, right? Or something that I was unfamiliar with. There was resistance there. And I think at Green Ocean, a lot of times we are trying to uncover those moments where psychologically we always have these little kind of like, oh, there's a little resistance, or sometimes there's a lot of resistance, whether it's technology or like we talked about fear and anxiety last time about, doing video. But we've got to start to pick at those a bit, right? And so I think that's what, part of today's conversation was. But in the long answer to your short question, what went well, I replaced a faucet, a washer, right, to stop a drip. But man, I got to tell you, it feels fantastic to have that thing fixed. And I think when it comes to business practices, some of the topics we're going to talk about here today, it just kind of maybe it's a good segue to talk about some of the things that we need to fix with our business.
For sure. Brought to you by Howard the Handyman Chung. So let's talk about goal setting. We're halfway through the year, this really crazy year of 2020 that isn't what any of us had anticipated, and how we've all had to kind of make different adjustments to get through that personally and professionally. And so let's talk about the second half of this year and ways that we might progress with maybe a little more efficiency, maybe better results. I know, Howard, you had some really cool things we were talking about earlier that I'd love to hear.
Well, if I can start it off, a lot of us are going to say, well, COVID just put this big wrench in everything in terms of, my results this year. And of course we can say that, and absolutely, it's very valid. I mean, it threw everybody, especially for people who've actually, got sick or, they lost a loved one. I mean, it's just, of course, anything like that, that's not just a COVID, that's just a traumatic life event. But for the people who haven't, ultimately lost anyone, it's not, that wasn't the situation. It's just, oh boy, I got to look at my business here. And the economy is down as a result. There's fewer sellers selling. And as a result of that, my income is down significantly. And so there's a lot of stress and anxiety because now there's also questions in terms of what's my next 6 months going to look like? And I guess the iBuyers are back. And, over the next 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, when it comes to technology and all these things that we've got to adapt to, the question is, do we have an amazing process? Not just an adequate process, but an amazing process of goal setting. And I think we've all had different experiences in our lives with goal setting, whether it was through books, whether it was through seminars, whether it was just kind of taught by our office leadership or, wherever that experience was. But, the question is, how's that worked? We've got to really take a step back and say, wait a minute, of all the processes in all these years that I've been doing quote unquote goal setting, how's that worked? Or maybe the better question is, has it worked consistently? Maybe it worked for a little while, but then, did it work consistently? And I think there's a lot to discover kind of in the space. But let me just kind of throw it back to you guys. What's worked for you historically in terms of goal setting, or what's not worked? I mean, what are your guys' experiences there?
So full transparency, I generally do my goal setting at the beginning of the year. And I kind of set these big lofty goals, and I do make sure that I write them down, and I make sure that they're just slightly outside of the reach of attainable, so that we have to work to try to hit them. And then I kind of don't really do the 12-week and mid-year checkups like I should.
I think what's really important for me, and this is only through trial and error over a lifetime of trying to set goals, right? That I found, at least personally, it's really important for me to have short-term goals as well as long-term goals. And so, because we all need to feel like there's something within our grasp, and you get those little rewards along the way, hitting those short-term goals, and how you incorporate those into how they move towards your long term. One of the things that I have learned, and I'm going to all be totally cheesy, is that, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
I like that, Paige. And that's, I remember when I was younger and, when I was just getting into sales, and they would, my sales managers would try to motivate me, and I would try to motivate myself with things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was always the mansion and the beach vacations and the Ferrari, and that never worked for me. so my goals today or the whys of my goals today are so different, right? And, now it's about like, okay, well, I need to be able to have a good home in order to raise my children. I need to be able to save in order to try to send them to college. Well, right now, we're just thinking about, we have 3 that are going to be about 16 here soon. And so I'm like, okay, are we going to have to buy like 3 cars?
In the 30-minute podcast, there's only so much we can kind of cover as far as goal setting and some of these ideas. But I think there are a few things that we can reflect on. And the first thing is, like, mid-year, a lot of times we only do like a business plan or review of goals or kind of what the results, only once a year. We basically say, oh, how much money did I earn this last year? And that's kind of about it. And around that same time, we go, oh, okay, now how much do I want to earn in the coming year? But rather than doing that, one of the things we should consider doing, and you mentioned short-term and long-term goals, Paige, is to maybe redefine some of the words that we use around these ideas. And of course, we've all heard of the SMART goals, like the specific, measurable, attainable, all that kind of stuff. But what I really wanted us to start thinking about is anything that's kind of big, aspirational. Let's say that long-term goal. That's part of our vision. And there's nothing wrong with, hey, I wanted to live in a nice home. I want that home to be paid off. I want to have a nice car because I like nice cars. I want to, also contribute to my community and be able to give. Like, those are all really good things, right? So those can be all part of one's vision. And even if it's like a 12-month vision, right, that's still kind of more visionary, because at the end of the day, our brains don't know what to do with, I want to earn $1 million by the end of the next 12 months. Okay, well, if you already have been earning $1 million every year, then it's not that big of a deal. You're just saying, hey, yeah, I just want to, continue to do what it is that I'm doing. But if you're earning 50,000 or 100,000, all of a sudden you're saying, I want to earn 500,000 or $1 million. Our brains kind of go, oh, okay, well, what do I exactly do with that? So it's a really great vision, right? It's a longer term, like, hey, I want to do behaviors to kind of attain this kind of wealth, right, financially. And a lot of times we think of financial goals rather than other areas of more abundance. And, as Ron will talk about with PERMA, right, with, our emotional, our well-being, our, kind of a measurement. But let's kind of break this down so that there's the long-term visionary kind of goals or vision down to the next 3 months, right? This is basically, instead of just saying, oh, mid-year review, let's look at how much income I've earned in the first 6 months. Let's talk about the behaviors, how many listings, how many sales, what are the things that I'm kind of doing well. So that's, we talked about the what went well. This is a great time mid-year to kind of say, here's the things I'm doing well. And that's a very important thing for us to do, because like, if it's going well and I'm earning income as a result of it and I enjoy doing it, I got to do more of that, right? So again, mid-year review, as part of that, is the reflection of what went well. The second part, though, is what am I not doing? What are some of the objectives that I need to do over the next 3 months? And so when we start thinking more along the lines of the word objective, and then there's a very specific time frame, 12 weeks, right? So that's a quarter. So that's basically, since we're at the end of June, we're talking about July, August, September. So by the end of September, what is an objective that I want to, basically have? And the objective, it should start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? Whereas a vision, it's nice to like have nice cars and, all those kind of things. Over the next 12 weeks, you're going to set an objective of getting 12 listings, right? 12 weeks, 12 listings. That's basically your objective. So I'm going to just throw that number out at you. That's 1 a week. In which case, what will we measure? Back to kind of your little quote there, Paige. What will we measure next week? Jason, what will we measure? In order, if you're going to get 12 listings in 12 weeks, what will we measure in 1 week from now?
So the first thing would be listing appointments.
Right. How many listing appointments? Because in order to get a listing, you got to have listing appointments. And of course, there's got to be a conversion factor where for every listing appointment or every 3 listing appointments, do you convert 50% of those, you convert 80% of those, or you virtually at 100%. People who work by referral, oftentimes they're virtually 1-for-1, meaning when they get a referral on the listing, they normally land that listing. It's pretty rare for them not to get the listing, right? So then in which case, then you can kind of figure out your ratio. So then, shoot, I need a listing appointment here in the next, week. All of a sudden, our brains know what to do with that. If I need to get a listing appointment in the next week, what do I need to start doing on Monday? On Tuesday, I need to start calling some people. And I need to start giving them an idea of what their house might be worth, or asking them if they know people who might also like to have a mid-year home valuation analysis. See, that's a really nice way to say, hey, Paige, I'm giving all my clients a little mid-year analysis in terms of the value of your home. Just curious, I haven't done that for you yet. When can I schedule that? It's just a Zoom call for 15 minutes. Oh, that would be great. And so I'm going to do a little comparison in terms of what, Zillow and the Zestimates, and as well as actual sales locally. And you and I can have a short little engagement. And then I might throw out something to the effect of, Paige, do you know anybody else, friends or neighbors, who might also, want one of these? A lot of people haven't had one of these done in years. Mm-hmm. And that is an offering. That's a value add that I can provide. And Paige loved the experience that you just got from me, right? In which case, oh yeah, so-and-so, right? My sister, my brother, my friend, my neighbor, they would actually, I think this would be great for them. In which case, well, would you do an email introduction? In which case, then even through an email introduction, I could set up another Zoom call. So those are things that our brains, right, can all of a sudden start to work with, rather than, I want to earn $500,000 in the coming year. See, so that is kind of like an objective. And then when we measure every single week, did I get a listing appointment? Did I get 2 listing appointments? Now, if after 3 weeks, we're finding that we've gotten 0 listing appointments, guess what we have to do? We have to change our objective. The chances of us now, after 3 weeks, getting 12 listings has greatly diminished because our behavior is not there. So then all of a sudden I got to take a deep inside look to be like, okay, the objective was too high. Now I only have 9 weeks left. I might have to reduce down my number from 12 to 9. And in which case then a little bit of that stress or pressure, right, starts to build up. I better start focusing on this then. And so then, like, what is it? How are we spending our time? So then we start taking a deeper look in terms of our time management, in terms of what kind of activities we're actually doing. So that is kind of a simple way for us to take a big goal, a visionary goal, narrow it all the way down to a 3-month or 12-week objective, and then, of course, every single week measure, something to that effect, like, hey, am I getting these listing appointments like I said I was going to do? The last part is, it's the accountability. Of course, I can hold myself accountable, but if I can, and for me personally, I kind of like took off in terms of my real estate sales. I was already successful, but then it was only because I started to get, very, very specific in terms of my time. I'm going to go into the office 3 days a week for 3 hours until I get 3 listing appointments for every session. That was 9 listing appointments a week. So if all of a sudden your goal is to get 9 listing appointments a week, you're going to have a really phenomenal year. But part of that was I had to get sign-offs by my managing broker as well as my wife, right? So that was the structure that was built in. So it's just like, you're going to make these 9 listing appointments, but every week you've got to get sign-offs saying that you did the activities. And so that is all part of kind of this objective and key result. And even that, companies like Amazon, I've got a friend who's a director, and every week, every Friday, all he does is he reads the reports, the accountability, as far as what went well, what didn't go well in terms of some of the key results from some of the, the reports that report up to him. And he's going to have dialogue about that. So, I mean, these are just kind of systems that we can create for ourselves that really are effective, that kind of go beyond, the traditional way that we've kind of done goal setting.
Okay, Howard. So that sounds good, and I'm down. I want to get 12 listings in 12 weeks, and I would like to get 1 listing appointment every week and crush it at 100%. Can you help somebody like myself? So what are the micro activities that I should be taking? What are my micro goals to set in order to get those listing appointments, especially today? I know you mentioned one, the mid-year review. What are some other things that we could be focusing on to try to get more listing appointments?
Well, the very, very first thing that we got to do is there's something called, anybody who's ever worked at a restaurant or a bar, they've heard of the phrase 86. I've used the word 86 for a long time. I grew up in the restaurant business. My family's had restaurants. And anytime you ran out of something, you basically said 86 it, right? 86, the spec A, which means like we're out of special A, right? So don't sell that anymore. We're out of it. So the very first thing we got to consider is a stop doing list. Okay. what are the things that I'm presently doing that's taking time that I've got to stop doing? Because most of us can't add more things until we decide to stop certain things, right? So one of the micro things, look back at the week, look back 2 weeks, go back 3 weeks, and say, what are behaviors that I'm presently doing that I need to stop doing? So for example, if I want to wake up earlier, there's a simple one, right? Most of us know, hey, our brains are are kind of at its best from like 5 a.m. to like 9 a.m. It's when we're most fresh. But I'm like, oh, but I don't wake up until 9. Well, in that case, and then as soon as I'm up, I gotta rush off and do what I need to do, right? So in which case then typically, and we still want sleep, 7, 8 hours of sleep. So in which case we got to look at our behaviors in the evening. Are there things like, for example, late night Netflix, right? Late night TV that we can 86. I'm going to stop doing that. Because then if I stop doing that, I find 3 to 4 more hours in the morning, or even 1 hour in the morning. If I find 1 extra hour in the morning, now I can start to say, well, what are those micro things? Well, the first thing I would do is say, you know what? If I know really good knowledge that I know that other consumers want, like for example, for 15 minutes, if I actually, in the first thing in the morning, I look at new inventory, I look at interest rates, I look at market statistics. Now I can start to reach out first thing in the morning, and I don't know about you guys. Anytime I receive emails early, or when I check the email at 9 or 10 or whatever, I see that the email was sent at like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I'm really impressed with those kind of people, right? Wow, they're really up and early, and they're talking to me about interest rates and what's been happening in the market and things of that nature. They're a business pro. So already the branding and association, professionalism, that rhythm is just starting off first thing in the morning. And can you imagine if every single morning our routine was to check inventory, what's hot? And you know what? I don't know about you guys, but 100% of everybody I know, they're always curious about a great deal. They're always curious about the real estate market, right? And so those are little micro ways, to kind of start off the process in terms of get rid of something in the evening so I can sleep a little earlier, so I can get up a little bit earlier, so I can start doing a little bit of data analysis, so I can share that market data about the real estate market, about particular listings, about great investment opportunities, any of those things with some of my database, right? Also, then maybe I'm going to organize my database first thing a little bit, start to look through, hey, who are the people I haven't reached out for a little while? So those are all the little triggers because, again, the entire week's got to be focused around where's that listing appointment? If literally that's your entire goal and that you're just, your entire reticular activating system is just looking for the one listing appointment, it's all you're focused in on, then it's just like, wow, I got 3 listing appointments this week. In which case then all of a sudden maybe your numbers start to, get crushed and you start beating out the 12. I should make it 24. I'm doing now 24 listing appointments, instead of just the 12.
I know, and it's human nature is that, like, many of us know that we should do that, but what's stopping us? Do you know? And I think that that's where you have to kind of go within yourself, because no one else is going to set those goals for you. Or if they do, you're probably not gonna hit those goals, right? And so I know that you had said something about, well, I find that extra hour, that 15 minutes or whatever. And I kind of started off this year because everything got out of routine and out of whack. And I found I was sort of like going in that direction of no structure. And that wasn't working for me, right? So I kind of had to 86 that behavior and create my own structure in the morning. And that helped me so much because I knew that those first few hours of my day were going to be productive. So I think it's okay to also be human and ask yourself, what's stopping you? What's in the way of setting those goals? And maybe you start off with one goal, and maybe it is making that extra 15 minutes in the morning. And what are you going to do with that? Try that for a couple of weeks. And how's that working for you? Probably good.
Yeah, if Ron Medved here, our Pacific Institute expert, but Jason and I have both been through it. I've been through it multiple times, and so there's a lot there in terms of your question. But a lot of that mindset is our limiting beliefs, right? Like what's stopping us is because like we have a limiting belief in terms of what we do or how we do things, right? But then once we kind of go through that, break that barrier, then it's just like, oh, and that's where affirmations come in, right? And the affirmation being something like, I wake up every morning early, refreshed, and I do a little analysis as far as the market and reach out to my clients. Like if I can basically start to create affirmations along that line, it's not what I'm going to do, it's what I do right now, right? That's basically the affirmation process. That's why I say it in first person present tense. I enjoy waking up early in the morning, right? And then you've got to create a picture of what that looks like. So it's just like, oh, what, we've all woken up early in the morning. We feel refreshed. We got a great night's rest. And just like, wow, I feel great, right? Like, oh, that's me. So all of a sudden you have that positive picture in your head. And then you create a positive emotion. Oh, I see myself getting up, getting into the shower, getting behind the computer, having my coffee, doing all those little rituals. And next thing you know, your brain go, oh, yeah, that's what we do. I guess that's what we do. And so that's just part, I think, of like what's getting in the way is that we don't have some of those behaviors or those routines. And a lot of times that's because we've got certain limiting beliefs in terms of, what we do as our morning ritual. And so, yeah, so many of these things are tied. Goal setting is tied to behavior, which is tied to sleep, which is tied to, our morning behavior. All of it's tied together. So, just part of it is not to do a review every 3 months. It's just not frequent enough. It's almost like a quick daily check-in, right, for ourselves, our calendars, but definitely a more reflective once a week check-in to be like, okay, what are the commitments for the week? How am I going to do it? That's just all part of the process. And I think largely intuitively we know that, and it's kind of like making that commitment. And as Ron would say, what can I do today? These things are so oftentimes aspirational, but if I literally bring it down today, wow, what can I do in the next hour? If people are listening to this podcast, what can I do like literally in the next 15 minutes after this podcast? What can I do in terms of my reflection? What can I do in terms of like 86ing Netflix past 10 o'clock, for example, right? I mean, those are all things that we can start to do, think about doing.
You mentioned accountability, and so I'm kind of lucky in that I do have a business partner. And so one of the things that we do every single Monday morning, we set aside a couple hours and we go over. And so I guess I don't do the quarterly business planning per se, but we kind of do this weekly planning. And I know in our business, in real estate, a lot of times people find themselves kind of alone. You're kind of it's just you. And so it's very important that we build these accountability partners or systems.
Of course, Green Ocean, we're all about the action items. And so back to your point there, Jason, sometimes it's the accountability and sometimes it's just not having enough specific direction or the clear action items that, a simple checklist, the to-do list. And we have a lot of those on greenoceantv.com. So we really encourage everybody to go try it out. Take a look. First week is free. There's an incredible amount of content on there. But what's so important is not just the content, it's the action items. And so it's like, thinking through, reflecting on the action items. And that's really what starts to cycle and trigger behavior changes. And so I think there's a lot more to talk about. I've got an accountability checklist that's really helpful as well. So maybe we can go over that here in the next podcast. But it's really time for us to kind of make that decision, make that commitment, for our businesses and understand, honestly, some of the science behind where business, sales, and psychology all kind of come together.
All right, Jason, I think it's time now for this week's tech tip. So what have you got?
So we've been talking about checklists and habits and goals. And so why not use some technology to help us get there? I've been trying out some habit tracking apps recently. For many, many years, I wrote down my little checklist on legal pads, right? And I'd carry that legal pad with me and I felt pretty good about that. And then a couple of years back, I started writing them down on my Samsung Notes app, and still very primitive. So I'm like, okay, let's step our game up, right? And so there's a couple of apps for Droid and Apple that I've been checking out that I think you can use. And basically you can just kind of create these little checklist items. And as you check them off, it keeps track and it starts to form the habit, right? And I know that there's this 21-day thing, and maybe that's accurate or not. But the point is, if we do these small little tasks on a very consistent basis, then we will reach our bigger goals. So for Droid, there's an app that I've been using. It's called Habitica. And this one's really cool because it gamifies the process. So not only are you marking off your action items, which like Howard talked about feels super good, but you're also leveling up your character as you're doing it, right? So it's fun. If you're kind of like, I'm a little bit more serious than that, then maybe Habit Tracker or Loop Habit Tracker. All of these are going to be, there's free versions, but I definitely recommend you get the paid ones. They're like $3 to $4 for the year. And then Apple has one called Habit List. That kind of appears to be the go-to one. Again, it's about $4 for the year. And you can just create these little small trackable tasks that when done consistently will become a habit.
If I could throw one last app along that same line, it's called Focus To Do. And you can also search for something called the Pomodoro, which is basically means tomato in Italian. And what the idea here is, it's a 25-minute timer. And I think a lot of people are aware of the 25-minute cycle, but we need to go for 25 minutes straight with uninterrupted workflow. So we need to do something for a straight 25 minutes. That means no texts, no social media, no ringing, like literally to the point where you're turning off your phone for 25 minutes. Some people are going to freak out about that. But if you want to really get something accomplished and be in a flow, you do it for a straight 25 minutes without interruption. Then you can go ahead and take a 5-minute break, check your email, check your text, make sure that no deals are falling apart. And then, of course, you can go for another 25 minutes. And then when you do these focused 25 minutes, you get so much more accomplished.
Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you were inspired by today's show. Please be sure to sign up for your free trial of greenoceantv.com. Learn from master-level industry experts and complete the all-important Go Actions. Go Actions help you and your team execute effective tasks in business and life each and every week. Thanks again, and we'll see you again soon.